Hey everyone, it's Blade Daily. Just wanted to quickly talk about the passing of Ted Turner, icon of media, of all kinds of media, of sports. Owner of the Atlanta Hawks, owner of the Atlanta Braves, many others, many others. A guy who was a pioneer in cable media, certainly. The guy who it was his idea to create CNN. This is a man who accomplished so much. A guy who was born into extreme privilege, but he used that privilege to leave a legacy and, far beyond just the properties that he owned and the big mergers and acquisitions that he spearheaded. He also constructed the Goodwill Games, also was an environmentalist and a very outspoken one. But I think wrestling fans are going to know him primarily as the owner of WCW. A lot of people will call him Billionaire Ted. But Ted Turner has a reach in the wrestling industry that goes almost as far back as Vince McMahon himself. So Ted Turner, what eventually became TBS, started up in the 70s, and it was the first national network upon which wrestling was allowed to air. And Georgia Championship Wrestling was able to be watched in a lot of households outside of their territory. And that happened, that carried on for a very long time. And eventually, Georgia Championship Wrestling loses their slot to WWF for a short time on what they called Black Friday. And then that time slot is eventually sold to Jim Crockett Promotions, and Jim Crockett Promotions finds their greatest success on TBS and eventually sells Jim Crockett Promotions sells to Ted Turner, who turns them into WCW. And the Monday Night Wars and, Vince McMahon's hatred of Ted Turner and all those things are very, well documented. It's a very one-sided rivalry. Ted was much more mainstream than Vince will ever be or ever was. But, Ted believed in pro wrestling. He was a fan of pro wrestling. And I think that's something that's worth noting is this billionaire, this man of extreme resource, who could just be completely removed from the world and, a total snob, nose in the air, is this guy who loves wrestling himself. And no matter who the corporate people around him were who wanted him to abandon wrestling because it wasn't prestigious enough, Ted refused for a decade or more. He just refused because it brought in great ratings and he enjoyed it himself. And he eventually gave Eric Bischoff the platform upon which to build Monday Nitro on TNT. And today, with AEW on TBS and TNT carrying that tradition forward, even with a long gap in between WCW and AEW, it's really cool, and it's a testament to what Ted did for pro wrestling. And I just wanted to kind of give my personal thanks as a wrestling fan. I think there's millions more who feel the same way. R.I.P. Ted Turner. Thank you.